So Rustici had several products that act as a LRP, again, a learning record provider. Driver is something that you can use to help enable your own content to be xAPI enabled, to create xAPI packages, to create CMI5 packages. And really, if you're already using Driver, it's as simple as saying you want to export in that format. It's not a big deal. Rustici cross-domain should allow you to dispatch your packages. And actually, I guess, Brian, correct me if I'm lying, because I'm a little fuzzy on cross-domain compared to our other products. But basically, it should let you dispatch your packages as xAPI or CMI5. Content controller also lets you dispatch as xAPI or CMI5. And also, it is going to record xAPI statements for any sort of content that you're playing or really hosting using content controller. That sort of conversion I talked about in my previous talk, and I think it's a really interesting feature of our software, and a good way to get started with xAPI is you don't even really need xAPI content. You can take any content and have it writing xAPI records and then gain the benefits of the portability, which you can then pipe along to another system. All right, so then we get to the LRS, the Learning Record Store. If you've got a learning management system, an LXP, things of that nature, a platform where you're storing data, you might want to be implementing an LRS. ADL defines really a couple different, they talk about different types of LRSs. They talk about noisy LRSs or transactional LRSs. And I think that ties in with the concept of portability, that you might have an LRS where just all sorts of records are coming in, and then you might be moving some of that information along to another LRS where you're keeping only some of the more interesting data that you want to report off of or make decisions based on. Yeah, if you're concerned about the information provided by the data, you may also want to be running an LRS for those reasons. So we might talk about a spec LRS. Sometimes it's just specifically an LRS that conforms to the ADL test suite, as opposed to sometimes people talk about an LRS as a whole system. If I say spec LRS, I'm talking about really that component within a system. You're going to want to be able to have multiple different accounts or learners authorized to write into that LRS. Again, if you go back to a launch mechanism, that's a way to authorize content to write to the LRS for a limited length of time. That's and then also you're probably going to want to be able to have a way to authorize access to the LRS for reporting and to pull data out. You probably also want to be able to push data out, because you may have other LRSs that you need to be able to write to. You're going to want to think of, you ought to be able to do data segmentation. An LRS should be able to have different tenants. Otherwise, you really just got to mess with just one big bucket of data. All right, let's go to the next one. Okay, so LRS products. An engine is going to come up across this list because Rustici Engine has the spec LRS within it. It's used in SCORM Cloud. It's used in Content Controller. It provides a way to do statement piping. We also do this thing called a data overlay, where we can add, when you do statement piping, we can actually, I was going to say we can add information to statements because that's what people kind of want to do it. But what we're really doing is we're creating new statements based on an old statement with some additional information, because, of course, statements are immutable. So we're not really modifying the original statement, of course. It does provide multiple different ways to authorize. There's both the launch mechanism and the temporary tokens for access. just during the context of a launch, and then a way to set up authorization, which is longer term for things like reporting. And it's very configurable. Storm Cloud uses Engine under the hood. It has a very simple UI for managing your endpoints, for setting up piping, for assigning credentials. It's free to get started with xAPI. So if you haven't checked that out, it's a really great way to take a look at xAPI quickly and easily. Content controller, I've got an asterisk there because it uses Rustici Engine. It has an LRS, and it uses the Rustici Engine under the hood to implement that LRS, but you can't, you only have limited administration of that LRS. It will enable xAPI content, and you can set up pipes to get your statements out, just like with any other LRS, but you can't directly allow someone to access the LRS within Content Controller because that's just not what it's intended to do. Next slide, please. Okay, so both systems can actually be both an LRS and an LRP. And as I talked about statement piping, that's a case where an LRS is providing statements to another system. In CMI5, you have an LMS, which is doing a launch, and it's also responsible for writing a launch statement. So you may not think of an LMS there as being a learning record provider, but it is, because it's writing at least that launch statement. Then later on, it'll be writing the satisfied statements, and so on. So and going back to the top of the slide, if it passes the LRS conformance test and it creates learning records, which could even just be by sending learning records to another LRS, then it is both an LRS and an LRP. And as it happens, all Rustici LRS products wind up acting as both.